His father died. His wife left him during his bad days. But fate didn't stop here, and now his younger brother was brutally murdered. So, he decided to take things in his own hands and engaged in a fight against both fate and the mafia. The fight that still echoes in many American hearts. Welcome back to Paramount Recaps. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me. The movie kicks off with Harlan DeGroat, who's hanging out in his car at a park, watching a movie with a woman. She makes the mistake of laughing at him, big no-no for fragile egos like his, and he totally overreacts by smashing her face into the dashboard. You know, the classic can't handle a joke type. A guy nearby sees this mess and steps in, and before you know it, Harlan's in a fight like he's auditioning for a bad action. Meanwhile, we meet Russell Bays, a guy grinding away at a steel mill in Pennsylvania. Hardworking guy, right? On his way home, he spots his younger brother Rodney's car near the racetrack and goes over, only to find Rodney looking like he's just lost his life savings on horse racing. Turns out he pretty much has. Russell asks where he got the money, and surprise, surprise, it's from John Petty, a loan shark who's basically the guy you should never borrow money from unless you want to be in serious trouble. Even though Russell's frustrated with Rodney's bad choices, he can't bring himself to lecture him too much. He's like, ugh, my little bro's a mess, but I can't yell at him. That's family, right? Afterward, Russell visits their sick dad, who's being looked after by their Uncle Red. The family really knows how to spread the drama around. While there, Russell learns Rodney is about to head back to Iraq for military duty. Russell's probably thinking, can't this guy just stay out of trouble for 5 minutes? Later, Russell visits John, the shady loan shark, and bumps into Harlan again because why not? Russell hands over his paycheck to clear Rodney's debt, like the good big brother he is. He even asks John to keep it on the down low, so Rodney doesn't find out. After that, Russell gets hammered at John's bar, because nothing says good decisions like drowning your sorrows with whiskey. On the way home, with a little too much booze in his system, Russell's driving when a car stops in front of him. What could go wrong, right? Well, everything. He crashes into it, killing a mother and her child. It's a tragic moment that lands him in prison for 8 years. Moral of the story, don't drink and drive, folks. During his time in prison, Rodney visits him regularly, but Russell's girlfriend Lena? Nowhere to be found. Rodney eventually tells Russell he's off to Iraq, like he's about to hit the reset button on the trouble in his life. A few years pass, and Rodney comes back from the military, only to deliver the bad news that their dad has passed away. Russell's crushed. First prison, now losing his father. Can this guy catch a break? Eventually, Russell gets released from prison, and Rodney's there to pick him up. They hit up their parents' graves first, a real tearjerker moment. Lena's moved on, and is now dating Wesley Barnes, the town's police chief. It's like watching your favorite show get canceled and replaced with something worse. Russell can only watch from afar, like an awkward third wheel that never got the memo. Now that they're both out in the real world, Russell goes back to his steel mill job, while Rodney dives into the world of illegal street fighting to pay off more debts. Rodney's terrible at fighting though. He gets knocked around like a punching bag, but when his opponent starts talking trash about his mom, Rodney loses it. He goes full Hulk mode, beats the guy, and manages to settle his debt. John, on the other hand, isn't thrilled about Rodney. He bet on Rodney losing, so now he's out some serious cash. Gotta love it when your shady business partner gets mad because you didn't fail hard enough. John tells Rodney, maybe you should try working at the steel mill like your brother. Rodney's response? Nah, getting my face punched in seems like a much better career choice. At home, Russell notices Rodney's all banged up but doesn't press him for details. The next morning, Russell finds bandages in the trash and finally confronts his brother. He's like, dude, you've got to stop getting beat up for money. Come work at the mill with me. Rodney, of course, flips out, saying life's pointless and he's basically over. He shows Russell some war scars and goes on about how Iraq messed him up. It's like a therapy session, only with more yelling and fewer breakthroughs. Later, Rodney goes to John, begging for another fight. John's hesitant because these fights are sketchy even by his standards, but Rodney won't let it go. So John gives in and calls up Harlan to arrange the fight. Rodney's pumped, but Harlan? Not so much. He takes one look at Rodney and starts cracking jokes, doubting his ability to fight. Rodney's like, oh yeah? Watch me. Classic tough guy move. Thankfully, John steps in before things go off the rails. Meanwhile, Russell tries one last time with Lena, but she shuts him down, dropping the bomb that she's pregnant with Wesley's kid. Ouch! Russell takes it like a champ, hugs her goodbye, and then heads over to the site of the car crash to pay his respects with. It's a heavy moment, but hey, at least he's making peace with the past. The next day, Russell joins his Uncle Red for a hunting trip, even though he's still emotionally wrecked. So, John asks Rodney to take a dive in his next fight, saying it's part of the deal with Harlan. But Rodney's sitting there, quietly fuming, thinking, no way am I letting that jerk. He hasn't decided if he's going to throw the fight yet. Not long after, the fight kicks off and Rodney's anger turns him into a beast, pummeling his opponent like it's a personal grudge match. John, sweating bullets, yells at him to stop and take the fall already. Rodney listens this time, stops fighting back, and takes a few hits like he's just tired of the whole thing. But his opponent doesn't get the memo and keeps going at him until John jumps in to save the day. After the match, Harlan strolls up to John all smug and says something like, well, that's a wrap for me. Got my cash. Thanks to Rodney. John's relieved it's all over and thinks he's done with Harlan's nonsense, but he should have known better. On the way home, Harlan and his crew stop their car, blocking John and Rodney at a bridge. Harlan steps up to John's car window, looking all sinister, and poor John, in his panic, drops his phone under the seat, accidentally dialing his bartender's number and leaving a voicemail. Classic move. Harlan leans in and says, oh, I'm not done yet, before straight up shooting John. After that, Harlan's guys grab Rodney and take him to some sketchy warehouse. Meanwhile, Russell comes back from his hunting trip and finds a note from Rodney. In it, Rodney apologizes for not listening to Russell's advice about quitting the fights and says that after this last fight, he's planning to work in a metal factory, do something less punchy for a little. While Rodney's getting tortured, Harlan decides to grace him with his presence. Rodney, being Rodney, calls him a coward. Harlan, obviously not a fan of being called names, shoots Rodney without hesitation. Cold-blooded. After killing Rodney, Harlan orders his men to bury him out in it. The next day, Wesley, the local cop and Lena's new guy, stops by Russell's place. Russell's thinking, oh great, here comes the awkward Lena talk, but Wesley's actually there to tell him about John's murder. At the police station, they play a recording from John's last moments that accidentally ended up on his bartender's voicemail. The cops have no idea where Rodney is, and everyone who was at the fight is keeping quiet. Russell's not happy and lets Wesley and the police know just how badly they've dropped the ball on finding Rodney. Frustrated, Russell and his uncle start snooping around John's office for any clue about Harlan's whereabouts. The bartender doesn't know where Harlan lives, but spills about the location of the last fight. Russell also discovers that John owed Harlan big time, and clearing that debt involved Rodney's fight. With that new info, Russell and his uncle rush to the fight spot, but of course, they find nothing but dust. Later, while driving around, Russell and his uncle get pulled over by a local cop who basically tells them, look, you guys don't belong here. Wesley told me to warn you, either leave or get arrested. So, with no other choice, they head back home, tails between their legs. A few days later, Wesley shows up at Russell's factory after work, dropping the bomb that the police found Rodney's body buried in. Russell's trying to hold it together, but inside, he's falling apart. Months pass, and life moves on. The cops raid Harlan's place, but the guy's a ghost, nowhere to be found. Tired of waiting around, Russell decides to take matters into his own hands. He sneaks into John's office, finds Harlan's number, and calls him up, asking him to meet at John's bar, saying he'll settle the debt. Harlan, smelling something fishy but too greedy to pass up the opportunity, shows up with one of his guys and a big bag, because, bad guys always carry big, mysterious bags. Russell's lurking nearby, gun in hand, and heads into the bar. He corners the bartender, demanding to know who called Harlan, but before things get too tense, Harlan shows up and shoots the bartender without a second thought. Not exactly a smooth entrance. Meanwhile, Russell takes out Harlan's men in another room and prepares for a showdown with Harlan. They exchange gunfire, and though Russell hits Harlan in the leg, the guy's still on his feet. Not one to give up, Russell forces Harlan into the woods, where Wesley shows up trying to stop it. But Russell's not having it. As Harlan stumbles off, Russell shoots him in the back, finally ending his reign of terror. In the end, Russell's back at home, and despite having killed Harlan, he doesn't end up behind bars. Wesley, being the stand-up guy that he is, covers for Russell, and life somehow goes on.